Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Christian Concern live stream again. Please do tune in and let us know how everything is going and how you're doing. It's been great doing these live streams these last few weeks. Since during lockdown, it's been a real great opportunity to engage with you, engage with our followers on social media, and really discuss some of the big issues facing Christians in the world today. Do remember that this is really an opportunity for us to engage with you. We don't want this to be a conversation just amongst us here on the live stream. We want it to be an opportunity for us all to hear your questions, hear your comments, and to engage with you in particular. Do let us know where you're tuning in from. Say hello from wherever you are in England or from around the world. It's always been great seeing the diversity in those who have been tuning into these live streams. And I guess that's one of the great blessings of technology, that we have been able to connect with many people who we wouldn't have normally been able to connect to. Hi, Rector from Rector Ipsley and Ruth Margaret Stunnell from Lancashire. It's so great to have you with us. It is really great and a pleasure and a blessing. Delighted to have with us today Andrea Williams, founder and chief executive of Christian Concern. Hi, Andrea. It's great to have you with us.
Hi there. Great to be with you.
And also to have Tony Rucinski, who's heading up Coalition for Marriage. Hi, Tony.
Hey, good to be with you guys.
It's great to have you with us as well. Tony does amazing work with the Coalition for Marriage, advocating for marriage and the centrality of marriage in society and the family. So really touching on some of the issues that we're going to be speaking about today. Firstly, some of you may have seen yesterday there has been global outrage after Netflix announced an upcoming film that was going to be released onto their streaming service, Cuties. In it, they had described initially how it was going to be a film about an 11-year-old who rebels against her traditional conservative upbringing by getting involved in a twerking dance crew. Netflix have since taken down the poster and have apologized, stating that the poster and the comments misrepresented what the film was about. The film is alleged to be about critiquing the hypersexualization of children in society today, particularly on social media. However, reviews for the film have been positive, comment on how a lot of the photography is of a voyeuristic nature, and how it features scenes of young preteen girls gyrating in a way that is inappropriate for their age. A petition for this has now amassed over 140,000 signatories, calling on Netflix to drop the film. It has this aim to critique the sexualization of the culture, but it seems to be doing that by sexualizing children. Andrea, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, in some ways, it's interesting the outrage that it has caused. Why do I say that? Because we live in a world that's hypersexualized. We live in a world where our children have been exposed now over many years to huge hypersexualization. We live in a world where we put our children into school, and even at a primary level, there's a sense in which some of the education that they are receiving and some of the themes that they're being taught are sexualized. And so to suddenly be surprised and outraged by this particular Netflix series or film, of course is right, because we don't want to actually see this in front of us, but we already are. And so it's an inevitable consequence of where we are in our society. And of course, what this film purports to do is to critique it, to say, what is it that we're doing to our children? In fact, how can this be good? But we are already doing it to our children. And the very fact that this film can exist is because where we've actually got to in our society. So I think there's multiple themes. Of course, we don't want to see preteen children gyrating, sexualized, these kind of images. But I think we only have to scroll down Instagram. We only have to walk along the high street to see this theme all around us. And so fundamentally, for us that love our children, and for those of us that want to protect our children, and not just our own children, of course, but the children in our nation, we have to think about the sexualization of our culture, where we are, even how we permit it or don't address it in our churches.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Katie Louise Hopes makes the interesting comment, children do not get to be children anymore. It's something that terrifies me as a mother of 2 girls who are under school age, but I do worry when they go to school what they will learn, and will they be able to be so innocent for as long as I would like them to be. Thank you, and do remember, keep posting your comments and questions into the comments section there. Tony, what do you think the sexualization of children has on the family? Like, as in, do you think that this, for example, increases rates of premarital sex, cohabitation, fornication?
Well, so the Bible's quite clear. If you want to look at a biblical principle, first of all, train a child up in the way they should go, and when they are older, they will not depart from it. And that works both ways if you do it well. If you don't do it well, generally speaking, when they're older, they won't depart from it. Now, I haven't seen this particular film, so I've got no idea whether it's good at what it's aiming to do, which is to challenge the prevailing sexualization of kids, which I think not everyone would agree needs challenging. And even those who agree that it needs challenging will kind of agree that it needs challenging in a different way. So, for example, everyone thinks that teenage pregnancies are, generally speaking, not a great thing and that we should have fewer of them. Some people think the way to tackle that is to teach younger and younger kids more and more about sex. And that's an opinion. But then when you look at the evidence and the stats over recent years and last couple of decades, the more we've taught kids about sex, actually, the more teenage pregnancies we've had. So the evidence would say that just telling them more about sex at a younger age doesn't work. Yet the pressure's on to do that even more with younger and younger kids. And, you know, I'm not going to go into it live on air, but the stuff we've seen coming out of Warwickshire, the stuff we know that's an official documentation about guidelines, international guidelines, teaching kids as young as 4 to learn how to touch themselves sexually and that sort of stuff. It's not going to end well if what you want is kids growing up, kind of kids enjoying their childhood and then growing up to be following.
The amount of time we talk about this stuff, you know, even in the schools, the amount of time that's spent in government departments and in local authorities looking at how we teach sex education, relationships education. Wouldn't it be amazing if we were teaching them about our history? If we were working out better and better ways to do maths and to do English, or creative space, creative times, you know, how is it that we are considering at age 4 and 5 ways of teaching them properly about sex, when in fact these are concepts that they don't really need to know at that time. And by introducing our children so young to these sorts of things, what we're doing is opening their minds to these things, giving them images that won't be eradicated, and in fact teaching them things that they're not ready yet to know.
I guess, Andrea, the objection to that would be it is there, as you mentioned earlier. It is there. It is on the internet. Tower Brewster makes the interesting point. Steve Jobs said he would not let his children go on the internet. Doesn't that tell you something? And I guess the thing is all of this stuff is so accessible now. How would you respond to someone saying, well, we need to deal with this stuff because otherwise the world will educate them? Tony, what would you say to that?
I think parents, so parents play a key role. I don't know, kids will spend, 14.5% of their time in school. The other 85.5% is spent out of school. So the role of parents in all of this, and nationally, we see parents still as the primary educators of children. And that's absolutely right. So you can't just leave it to school. You've got to, again, it's back to that verse, bring a child up in the way they should go. So it's in all things. I mean, parents have different standards, different guidelines. We let our kids watch some things at home that other parents might think, so Jurassic Park, ours watched that from a very young age. Yep. And people thought, how can you let, with all the violence with the dinosaurs? didn't really bother us. But other things like certain films, and I won't be too contentious now, so I won't name them, but other films like you've got a girl who doesn't know who her father is because her mother slept with so many men. That sort of thing we wouldn't play in our house because it trivializes the kind of things we wouldn't want to trivialize. Certain songs and records, I mean, if you listen to a lot of rap music these days, which is just in the culture for young children to listen to, and the things that are depicted, you learn what you sing and you believe what you sing, and people are just hearing these things with apparent impunity, but it isn't impunity. It programs kids from a young age.
And I think that's where I want to say, parents, we are given our children as a gift from God. And that's a very serious responsibility. And then let's extend the children into the family, but also then let's look at the church family. All those children that are in our church communities belong to us as the church family. And I think, therefore, in a world where there are all these dangers, cultural dangers, which will poison their young minds, we need to be saying, let's keep our children safe. So we're the ones that need to do something radical. Yeah. And in our home, we need to have pure hearts. The parents need to have pure hearts. And we need to teach our children to have pure hearts. And in our churches, we need to be saying, these children are hard. If necessary, if we're not influencing the local school to a sufficient degree whereby we are setting the agenda, setting the policy agenda, highly influencing them, then let's have our own schools. We are still free to do that. If we can't trust the state system, the new state orthodoxy, the state teaching systems to deliver the education that we want for our children, then we need to start thinking radically. Now, I when I started with my children in school, my eldest now is 25, this wouldn't have crossed my mind, not at all. But now, seeing across the years, across my time in raising children and being in the States and coming back, but seeing Christian education done really well, home education done really well, and seeing where we're at in our culture in terms of what our children are being exposed to, I think we have a serious issue to consider as the church. We often talk about planting churches. Well, how about planting schools? How about looking after our own children full time? And that would be
absolutely. I think that's, and that verse that Tony goes back to, bring them up in the way they should go. And in Ephesians it talks about bring your children up in the teaching, the discipline, correction, the paideia of the Lord. And that's
absolutely
the whole worldview, the Christian worldview. That's how we should be discipling our children. But we've compartmentalized.
And Andrew's got a key point there, Ben, because the church and parents need to get involved in a very positive way, because it's not. It's often conveyed as prudish, kind of lawmaking. Do this, don't do that. Actually, the Bible's quite clear that there's a way that seems good to a man, but the end is the way of death. And actually, there's a way that can seem good to kids, and you've got to be able to, as a parent, to have this mature conversation with your kids and say that might look and seem and feel the right thing to do, but actually the end isn't good, and here's why. And just to kind of be that active participatory parent, you've got one chance with your children, one chance when they're young to try and get it right. Invest the time, invest the care, find out what they're learning in schools, find ways of putting the other side to them and showing them that actually it's not just you saying this because you're a mean, hard-nosed parent. It's because it's good and it's right and it's going to help them in life.
And can I say about this as well? I think something else that's really important, and it's sort of shifting the issue onto sort of looking at the church as a whole and what it is that we're teaching our children. That if you think that porn is accessed now, I think the stats say that boys as young as 9, and I think girls as young as 11. I think that's the average age at which boys are seeing porn. And if you look at a number, there are multiple studies which also show that pornography is rife amongst those that are in church and in church leadership. I find that's very hard to believe myself. I don't even want to go there in my head. But these are the stats I've seen over and over again. They're consistent. And to be honest, even if they're half true, these stats, they still horrify me, the percentages. And I feel, I don't even feel, I know that what must be right, what must concern our Father God is the purity of the church, the sexual purity of the church. And very often we are paralyzed within our own camp. We are compromised. And this is where the hope of Christ and his transformative power rings true and becomes true. When we focus on this as a serious issue within our own church family, we will then understand the importance of ensuring that our children get taught likewise. When we know that our young boys may be exposed to pornography as young as 9, we will be future-proofing them. We will be porn-proofing them. We will make it a no-go zone, because we will do this because we are a family that loves, that looks after, that watches over, that protects and builds the parallel institutions, builds the places where people want to be, the places where people are whole, the places where people aren't fearful. You know, the thing is, there's no good throwing our children into spaces that aren't safe and leaving them there all day long and expecting them just to come out okay, or not propagandized, or not thinking in the way of the world. When the world is in such chaos, we have to keep them home. I mean, home in the church, home in what God believes. This is our primary missionary field. Tony spoke about parents being the primary educators. Well, these are the young people that we have to disciple as parents. And then when I think of my church family and the children within the church family, I care passionately about those children. I don't want that one would be lost from the age of pre-born, in fact, right up to the cohort of my children. But we don't want any of them to be lost to the world.
But Andrea, this message isn't being preached in the church. Ruth Margaret Stunnell makes the comment that this needs preaching on church in the adult services, but this isn't the message that's coming across. I think there's a lot of fear, a lot of hesitation about doing what is necessary. We think the church had all the schools before in the past, and then we handed them over to the state, and we now have this we have the Church of England schools, but oftentimes the Church of England schools are worse than the other schools. And so I think we need bold Christians. Nigel and Sally Rowe are our clients who withdrew their children because they're transgender. There were transgender students in the primary school, and this was being pushed. That was in a Church of England school. And so we need Christians, churches, proclaiming this from the front and being bold about how can we be protecting our children? How can we be raising them up in the way they should go, in the paideia of the Lord? And that means setting up schools. And that, these are difficult things. We're not saying this happens overnight, but you maybe make the decision overnight to make that step, to take that first step. Tony, what do you think the church can be doing about this issue?
So I think that the schools conversation is another big one in and of itself, and that's one worth having some time. But it's almost like it could take up all of our time now, because that's a really good one and a really big one, and we need to have it. The churches, you're quite right. That's generally speaking, of course, I don't know every church. I know quite a lot of churches, though, with other hats on. And I think one of the problems is often ministers feel they don't want to be too prescriptive in their preaching, and it's very generalized. And we're following the way of the world in some cases, in that the world thinks there is no wrong and right. It's what people feel. But actually, from a Christian perspective, there is a wrong and there is a right. And it's pretty clear in the Bible. And we should be encouraging parents to sanctify themselves by the word, to grow in grace, to improve their lives, if you like, and make them more like Christ. A lot of people don't even know what that language means, let alone how to become it in their lives, if you like, and how to apply it. And then to be kind of sanctified parents in return, because you've got to put the effort in. I mean, it's like access to pornography. Andrea's quite right. Do parents have a clue what's going on their children's devices? What they're looking at, what they're following on Instagram, what kind of adverts they're seeing, what kind of web links are being sent to them in emails? Do they even have a clue? I was surprised, very young, one of my younger children, somebody in their class had to leave the school recently because she'd sent some naked pictures of herself to a boy, and a boy had sent them everywhere, and she just couldn't handle being there, every day, dealing with that sort of stuff. And that's nothing unusual. When I express my shock, the kids will say, this happens all the time, Dad. When we talk about things that we shouldn't talk about at home, or things that you shouldn't watch on TV, Dad, it happens all day, every day in class. So there is a degree to which we've got, and again, it's kind of like being salt and light, isn't it? Stopping the rate of decay, shining a light on the darkness. These aren't passive things that just will naturally happen through the Spirit.
Yeah.
God wants us to be active in implementing them and looking at them, if you like.
I think parents need wisdom in how to raise their children, how to be setting boundaries on social media. As we said earlier, it's not about making loads of strict rules and being legalistic. We need wisdom in social media, wisdom with technology. I didn't have a phone. Children these days have smartphones, by the age of 10, and I didn't have a phone by that age at all. I had my first smartphone, I think, when I was 16. So, we need wisdom. We need to have an understanding about what's going on so that we can speak to our children's lives, speak with them, come around them, and support them.
I think it's really what I want to be saying. I want to be saying to our young people, I think there's just a reality. Even you, Ben, who are so young, in effect, the thing is, 16 years ago for you was about 10 years ago, and the world has changed again since then. And there is a reality that, for now, some of our young people are making the most extraordinary creative projects on their phones. And so another way to do it is say, we're going to use this stuff for the good. That we are going to create pieces of beauty, of glory that actually that are countercultural. We're going to produce the best music that glorifies God, films that glorify God. We are going to do, and again, if we put this into our churches, if we put this into the hearts of our young people, if we say, with these devices, make stuff that is good, glorify Jesus. This is another. We want the best filmmakers. We want the best songwriters. We want the best script writers. We've got the best stories. And just imagine a world of stories and song and images that glorify the Lord. Imagine a purity culture. The world is waiting for a purity culture. Our young people wants to be told that they can be safe. Our young people need to be told there's a different way, a different purpose. Our children need to be told, forget that mess and come to this beauty. And there is an inherent beauty. When this mess is unfolding, and with it comes the addictions and the brokenness, Jesus Christ feels the depth of that despair. So let's have the courage to talk about reformation in our churches, repentance, revival, and
reformation in our homes too, Andrea. Okay. It's like we've got this because of the lockdown. 2 of our university kids are home, and so that we're kind of finding things you want to watch together is always a struggle with kind of 6 people in the house, if you like. But we've got this. We often end up in a situation where we start watching a film, and then after 5 minutes you have to turn it off because clearly it's not going to be appropriate. And it happens. It's almost like a running joke in the family. If we can get past 10 minutes, it's a record. But we often do find something. But then there are good things like you can look up. IMDb has got a parent guide, and there are other parent guides where you can actually, and maybe a lot of us should be doing this before we watch a film. Is to look at the parent guide, for example, and say, are there things in that parent guide that I'm happy to have in my home and watch with my children? Because sometimes once you've started watching, it's awkward to stop, and people find that difficult, But maybe just doing practical things like looking up parent guides before you watch a film together. Just all sorts of things like that.
Comment here as well. She says our children should also learn about our world missionaries and the history in each country. I remember as a little girl reading about John Wesley, and let me tell you, and the fact that he got on his horse, you know, and all of that, and I mean those sorts of things, and the mission, and that Wesleyan revival, and I just love the old missionary stories, the story of George Muller, all of these. Tony, have you got a book there?
Well, yeah, I'm sat next to my wife's desk, and here's a book on Amy Carmichael.
Amy Carmichael, there we are.
All that sort of stuff.
Florence Nightingale, heroine, you know.
Yeah.
I think absolutely we need to make sure we're protecting our children, discipling them, understanding what's going on, and understanding what's going on in the culture. I think there is a point to be made about, in a sense, this Netflix film is just one of so many things, and it's kind of like, where's the outrage at everything else, which is almost far worse if we think of things like drag queen story time and things like that. The whole culture is messed up, and we as Christians and as the church,
keep our children safe. Yeah, they're ours.
I think we might move on. So just this week, a report from the Center for Social Justice, Family Structure Still Matters, provides a new close analysis of the correlation between family structure and the outcomes for children and parents. The report reveals that marriage seems to be the middle class's best kept secret, one that improves children's school performance, supports their physical and mental health, and leads to more stable relationships in the future. I mean, to us, that maybe is not a surprise. Tony, what are your thoughts on that report?
What a surprise, Ben. Grass is green. Who knew it? You know, it's the thing is, I get it. I mean, everybody, most ordinary people, if you said to them, look, is it best for kids to grow up with their mum and dad in a stable family environment? Everybody, absolutely right. But in our attempts not to make people feel bad, it's almost like you can't say that anymore. And we've got to find a way of just navigating the two things that actually, you know, ideally, we need to let people know that the best environment for kids, unequivocally, and all the research says this, is for a child to grow up with its biological mum and dad in a married relationship. All the stats and everything says that is best. Of course, there are occasions when you can't do that, when it, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. And we should put support structures in to avoid it breaking down and to help when it does. But let's not let that take away from the main message, which is that as far as possible, a mum and dad bringing up their child is best for the kids, you know? And actually, we should be thinking not what's good for adults and how can I get the most enjoyment out of life, but what's best for the next generation and what's my responsibility and my commitment if I have kids.
Well, unfortunately, this report doesn't seem to make the distinction between opposite sex couples, i.e. real marriage, and so-called gay marriage.
And it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. I reckon it's for a few reasons, Ben. First of all, fairness, the stats on gay marriage and gay parenting in quotes, of course, because you can never have two parents because, of course, you have to have an external entity getting involved. But the stats are so small that on the larger scale of things, they're almost insignificant, and it hasn't been going on for long enough to take any reasonable measurements. But there is research. You know, we've often spoken about Walter Shum's book, Same-Sex Parenting Research. There is research out there if you want to look at that in particular. But this report, in order to get read and not to get just kind of cut down straight away, they've included everything, which, so fair enough. But then they do state in the report, because those numbers are so small, we're just going to refer to, you know, male and female couples with children, because that's where the majority of the research is done and where the majority of impact comes from.
Yeah. In our book, Same-Sex Parenting Research, published by Wilberforce Publications, it did show and critique that assumption that heterosexual parents and homosexual parents, children of those relationships, have the same outcome. In fact, it says homosexual relationships are far more likely to experience breakdown than heterosexual ones. And Walter Shum actually writes in the book, so we have lesbian women more likely to become parents than gay men, but also more likely to dissolve their relationships. Would not those facts lead to greater harms to their children and to more children relative to gay parents because of the higher rates of instability? The
report makes some. It's got some key. You're absolutely right, of course. And it's almost like I'm assuming, and perhaps my assumption is wrong, that a lot of people tuning into this will understand that that God has a model clearly in the Bible for one man and one woman for one lifetime, and that's his model, right?
Yeah.
But the report makes the clear statement that kids do best when growing up with their biological mum and dad, and that the relationship type that supports that is what we call marriage, and anything else just doesn't lead to that as successfully as marriage does. So the government should be supporting marriage. Why on earth aren't they? And it's just grass is green. Everyone knows that. If only the government and the mainstream media would actually, acknowledge it too.
Because, Natalie Grove Stevenson does make the point, marriage is an institution ordained by God. And we do need to remember that marriage does predate the fall. It's a creational institution. Yep. It's not a Christian institution in that sense, as in it's marriage for everyone. And of course, the Bible does tell us, how that marriage should look and how those relationships should be ordered. And so this idea that we can kind of just redefine marriage however we want to do really is going against creational norms and against God's creational institution and God's plans for society and families and things like that. Andrea, how can the church be speaking into this? How can the church be speaking about the family?
Well, I think that we need, you've talked about it being a creation audience. Actually, it's the way in which it's a Genesis 1 creation principle, foundational principle of how we are to live, the how now to live, God's purpose, God's creation, God's pattern. This whole session here today is about how we should live in the light of God's purposes, God's way, God's ordinances. And I think that the reality is this, with regards to marriage and government incentivizing marriage, that this report from the Centre for Social Justice is really important. It's what we already know, and all the social science studies show this. They've shown it across decades and decades of study. We also know for sure Watersham's book is the definitive study on how children do when raised in same-sex households. That also doesn't that tends to fail. The outcomes aren't so good. But what we've got to remember is this: yes, the government should incentivize marriage, but there is a fundamental problem with our government, with our nation, is that we've redefined marriage. We've made marriage a free for all. We have we in lockdown made divorce even easier. No fault divorce.
Yep.
So there's nothing, certainly a long way from wedlock. It's wed lease. It's I can get out as easy as possible, easier than getting out of my pension or the service contract that I have with the offices here in central London. Easier to get out of my marriage than this contract for our Christian Concern offices.
Yep.
So the point about it is this: if you don't know what marriage is, if you are a society, and let's just talk about the whole of this here. If you don't know the whole of this live stream, which has been about the sexualization of our children, if we are a society that is drenched in a kind of Romans 1 culture where we are just doing what we want in our own eyes, it's a moral free-for-all, then we're going to end up in chaos.
Yeah.
And out of chaos, what is the order? Well, the order is marriage. Of course, it's repentance. But what will bring order? Well, it's what God created, which is one man and one woman to live with, to be joined together in lifelong union, and for them to create children.
Yeah, Emmanuel Roosevelt does make the point, marriage is a key to keep the kids healthy, but single parenting is on a continuous increasing high rate. Divorce is fast increasing, and this has a lot to play on the children's mind. And Andrea, you were mentioning about the government and how they've tried to make divorce easier. We do need to be careful about judging individuals. But I think when we do have a prime minister who seems to have not value marriage in his behavior, we wouldn't expect these policies to be made. And I think that, you know, there's in a case that there's a lot from our Prime Minister's life and family that maybe we have maybe been too easy to just brush over. You know, if we have a Prime Minister who's been married 3 times, divorced, who has committed adultery twice, maybe more, do we expect there to be pro-marriage policies and laws to come into place? And again, I just want to emphasize, we of course submit to our government leaders and we pray for Boris Johnson. We should all be praying for him. But the thing is there's obviously going to be, his pro-marriage policies clearly wouldn't be modeled by his lifestyle. So should we expect that? And so single parenting, divorce has been on the rise over the last 50 years. And Tony, you know a lot about that. What would you say?
So what? Just picking up on some of the points you made there. Firstly, I'm not the sort of guy that thinks your public life and your private life should be separated. Which is, we seem to have, you know, okay, you can't. It's not a comment about Boris Johnson now, but you know, somebody can't be faithful to the people and be honest to the people who are closest to them, but we should trust you with the country. Well, from my point of view, that doesn't make logical sense. You know, you want somebody who's trustworthy and honest in all of their life. That's the sort of person you want to be leading you, ideally. But can you find that sort of person? I've got no idea. Andrea touched on another bit where I like to pick up, which is about marriage being the union of one man and one woman. And people pick up on that and say, well, you know, it doesn't have to, anyone can form a union. It doesn't have to be one man and one woman. Actually, a lot of people don't understand that the coming together as one, the one mind and the one flesh thing, you know, it's almost like not anyone can do that. Only a man and a woman can come together and form that thing which can create new life. Yep. No other, you know, 2 women can't do that, 2 men can't do that. Only a man and a woman can do that, you know. And even if that doesn't mean marriage doesn't apply to people who can't have children, because nobody can have children until you've had children, right? And nobody knows when they're kind of, you know, conjugating their marriage that it's worked or not. But the principle of that coming together, that's the special thing. And that can only be done by a man and a woman. You know, you can, a motor car is only you know, an engine is only an engine when you bring certain components together. You can't just shove random a brick and a I don't know, an iPhone and a piece of a wardrobe door. That's not an engine, you know. So only a man and a woman can be that thing which we say is foundational to marriage. So you can't redefine what that is. That's what marriage is. And if you look through history, ancient writers, Plato, Aristotle, you know, Enlightenment writers Locke and Kant, and obviously the religious writers Aquinas and Calvin, all through history and all through cultures, there's been this observation of when one man and one woman get together in a monogamous relationship, that thing is the thing that society produces the best version of the next generation by doing. And that's the thing that we need to focus on and strengthen. And so from the Coalition for Marriage's point of view, you know, people say, oh, you're homophobic. We're not homophobic. We're focusing on that one definition. So thruples is not that one definition. You know, temporary unions is not that one definition. You know, that commitment for life between one man and one woman is the thing that marriage is, and that needs to be kept precious.
Yeah. So what can we be calling for? Like, what does the government supporting marriage or the government? Yeah.
Well, it's quite interesting because the previous time that the Centre for Social Justice touched on all this stuff was about 2013, and at that time they were calling for a better married person's allowance to be transferable, so a much higher tax allowance, and for that to be transferable. Because one of the problems you've got is that for poorer couples with lower incomes, actually, if they get married, they lose a load of benefits. So the government's paying people to stay single. So it's like saying, what's the worst thing you could do for your kids really in life? We'll pay you to do it. Absolute madness. You know, we should be incentivizing, especially for kids from disadvantaged homes who could do with the advantage of a stable home. Let's incentivize mum and dad to stay together, you know, and let's do whatever we can. Spiritually speaking, right? It's like, where is it? It's Psalm 11, verse 3 off the top of my head. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? First of all, righteous, wake up and recognize the foundations are being destroyed, and then stand up and do something. It's like Jacob. We were reading about Jacob the other day in another context, and he said to his sons when Joseph was off in Egypt and was starving, "What are you stood there looking at each other for? Do something." And in the same way, the church was stood there looking at each other. Isn't it awful? Get up and do something. Write to your MP. Speak out. If you get vilified on social media, suck it up. That's how you change the culture. The rugby player last week, you got an awful lot of hassle from saying in the mainstream media, marriage is good and should be recommended. Well, he's led the way, follow. More people get on the bandwagon. The more of us say it, politicians live by their popularity, by the mainstream media. If the more of us got up and said what we really felt, maybe they wouldn't be so scared to back us up.
I mean, the really revolutionary act is marriage itself and good marriage. Yep. And what we've got to do is we've got to, the Christian people in this nation, in a time where you have a sort of where a nation is destroyed, morally destroyed, the revolutionary act is to get married, have children, build your homes, build your allotments, look after, tend to the home, keep your family safe, keep your community safe, be the family beacons on the hill, look after the widows, look after the orphans, look after those that are single, bring those single people into your congregation, bring them into your family units, bring the children into your family units. Let's love, let's reach out, let's build the beacons on the hill, let's be the God's community, let's be the Jesus communities, the love communities, the pure communities. You see, the thing is, we can be this, we can be the schools, we can be the healing houses, we can be the place where marriage works. We should be setting the standards for the world, not reflecting the standards of the world, not thinking that somehow we have to make church so attractive like the world that it looks like so that people will come in. No, we're going to model something that's so countercultural. Purity, we're going to model family, we're going to model marriage that works. We're going to say, this is it, we're here, come and join us. And what's more, we're going to be open 24/7 so that we say to people, you come on in, be part of us. We'll show you how to do this, because we'll link arms, and that's how we're going to do it. Don't look to the state to tell you how to do it all. Look to Jesus to tell you how to do it all. Don't look to the state to provide for your house. Look to Jesus to provide for your safety, for your security, for your housing, because he will. Because something that's stronger than the state, something that's better than the state, something that works better than the state is the Lord Jesus Christ, is King Jesus. And when we, the church, submit to that authority, to that kingdom, we will build the new communities, the fresh communities, modeled upon him, with proper deference to the state where appropriate, but that it looks so like him that people will be compelled to follow. The problem right now is that we can't see what he looks like. We're part of a muddled mess when we have a distinctive beauty that is there to behold for the whole world to see. So let's do it.
And we can get back there. We can, we can tell that better story. We can show a better example. Just a practical thing for people. I don't know if there are any ministers watching, if members of churches watching, but does your church have a premarital course for people who are engaged? Does it help them prepare for marriage? Does it have ongoing marital support? Because we all have problems in our marriage. Let's not pretend that it's easy, because it gets hard. And sometimes we all need a little bit of help. Does your church provide that? Does it know who provides that? Do you even know who in your church is having a difficult time? We've all got to be part of making this great, because it can be great. And one other point, I know I'm going on a bit, but for those newly married or thinking about getting married, you will marry the wrong person. Yep. But, a lot of people have said that, and you do, because suddenly you find out about a person that some things you never found out before, you never knew about them until you lived with them. But that's the point of marriage. Over the years, you work on those things because you've committed to stay together, and you've committed that you're not leaving no matter what. And okay, adultery and abuse over there, but often the things that split people up aren't those things. They'll split up for any reason. And in fact, you don't need a reason according to the law now, which is absurd. You can just go. But actually, marriage is about the commitment. And the longer you commit, the better it gets. I love my wife, and we love each other now more than we ever even knew love existed when we were first married 25 years ago. It gets better with investment. and we're different people because of each other. And, God is in our relationship as well. That's the third person in our relationship. But it's just a wonderful fact that we are new creations, not just because we're converted, but because of our marriage and because the way God has helped us to work on each other. And it's just glorious. And anyone you meet, you want to tell them that really, get married, stick at it, because it just gets better as the years go on.
Oh, well, thank you for that, Tony. Absolutely, so true. We model, we center, we commit. Marriage is a covenant, it's a union ordained by Christ, and absolutely, it was wonderful to hear. The thought is, if God divorced us in the same way we're divorcing each other, then none of us would be saved. So we thank the Lord for His grace and what He has done for us, and how we can model that in our marriages and in our lives and in our churches as we seek to proclaim the good news to society. Thank you so much, Tony, for joining us today from Coalition for Marriage. Please do, if you're here, join out the link.
Plug. Can I give a plug?
Sorry.
Can I give a plug? Go to C4M. Charlie, C4M.org.uk and click the join button. Free, don't want your money, just want to keep you involved in the conversation, nothing more than that.
Please do join, and then tell a friend to join. The link is
in
the comment there.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Tony. It's been amazing having your insights and your comments, and do also check out our Gospel Issues seminar a few weeks ago, which Tony Rucinski spoke on regarding marriage and the role of marriage in society. It was great having you there, and so do watch that if you're interested in these topics. You can find that on YouTube. We also have our next Gospel Issues seminar coming up on the 7th of September with Dr. Peter Jones, talking about how paganism is infecting our culture today, and connecting that with what we're seeing in terms of sexuality and sexualization of our culture. So do tune into the Dr. Peter Jones. How does our worldview affect our sexual behavior? So it'd be great to tune into that. That's on Monday, the 7th of September at 8 p.m. That will be an amazing event there. And as I mentioned, check out some of our previous Gospel Issues seminar, including with Tony Rucinski. Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been great to have you both with us. And thank you all for joining us and making your comments and asking your questions. We love engaging with you. We love speaking to you. Thank you all.
Bye.